What does it feel like to walk into a palace you built with your own hands, only to be treated like you're trespassing on someone else's land? Maya Carter, a 45-year-old black woman with a commanding presence and a heart full of grit, was about to find out. It was a balmy afternoon in Dallas, Texas, the kind where the sun draped the city in a golden haze, and the air carried the faint hum of ambition that made this place a hub for dreamers and doers. Maya stepped through the glass doors of the Grand Horizon Hotel, one of the crown jewels of her hospitality empire, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. The lobby was a masterpiece crystal chandeliers casting prisms of light, plush velvet chairs inviting luxury, and a grand piano playing a soft melody in the corner. This was her creation, a five-star sanctuary where every guest was supposed to feel like royalty, a place she'd poured her soul into over 2 decades of relentless work. But as she approached the front desk, her heart sank with a familiar, bitter sting she felt invisible, as if the very walls she'd built refused to acknowledge her existence. Maya wasn't here for a victory lap or a photo op. She'd come incognito, no designer suit, no flashy entourage, just a simple navy blouse and slacks, her hair swept into a neat bun that spoke of understated elegance. At 45, Maya had the kind of beauty that came from confidence and experience, her deep brown eyes sharp with intelligence, her posture a testament to years of carrying the weight of leadership. But today, she wasn't the CEO who turned a single rundown motel into a chain of luxury hotels across the South. She was just another guest, checking in for the night, her backpack slung over one shoulder, a reservation confirmation tucked away in her phone. She'd heard the whispers complaints piling up like storm clouds over this particular hotel in Dallas. Guests being turned away for no reason, staff with attitudes sharper than a Texas summer, rooms mysteriously unavailable for certain customers. Maya could have handled it from her corner office with a few emails and a stern phone call, but she knew better. Problems like this didn't fix themselves with memos. They needed to be seen, felt, confronted head-on. So here she was, unannounced, ready to witness her empire's so-called world-class service through the eyes of a stranger. The front desk loomed ahead, a sleek counter of polished mahogany, manned by a young woman whose name tag read Ashley. She couldn't have been older than 25, her blonde hair pulled into a messy ponytail, her posture slouched in a way that screamed she'd rather be anywhere but here. Ashley's fingers danced across her phone screen, her eyes glued to whatever drama was unfolding on social media, her bubblegum pink nails tapping with a rhythm that said she didn't have time for the world around her. Maya stood there for a moment, waiting to be noticed, her breath steady but her chest tightening with a mix of anticipation and dread. She'd built this place to be a haven, a refuge where every guest felt valued, but the air here felt cold, unwelcoming, like a door slammed shut before she could even knock. She cleared her throat softly, a polite nudge, but Ashley didn't look up. Maya tried again, louder this time, her voice a calm melody in the sterile silence of the lobby. "Excuse me," she said, her tone warm but firm, the kind of voice that had closed million-dollar deals and inspired boardrooms full of skeptics. Ashley let out a sigh so dramatic it could have won an Oscar, the kind you save for when someone dares to interrupt your very important scrolling session. She dragged her gaze up to meet Maya's, her blue eyes blinking slowly, as if Maya had just materialized out of thin air and ruined her day. "Yeah?" Ashley said, her voice flat, devoid of the warmth or professionalism Maya had drilled into every employee handbook she'd ever written. Not "Welcome to the Grand Horizon," not "How can I help you today?" Just a single word, dripping with indifference, like Maya was a fly buzzing too close to her picnic. Maya's stomach twisted, a sharp pang of disappointment cutting through her like a knife. She'd faced this before. In boardrooms and business meetings, the subtle dismissal, the unspoken assumption that she didn't belong in spaces she'd fought tooth and nail to create. But here, in her own hotel, the sting felt personal, a betrayal of everything she'd worked for. She adjusted the strap of her backpack, her fingers brushing against the worn leather, a small reminder of the scrappy days when she'd started with nothing but a dream and a beat-up laptop. "I have a reservation," Maya said, keeping her voice even, though her heart was pounding with a mix of frustration and resolve. "Maya Carter." Ashley's lips twitched into a smirk, a flicker of something disdain, maybe that sent a chill down Maya's spine. The young woman turned to her computer, her fingers tapping the keyboard with all the enthusiasm of a sloth on a Sunday morning. Hmm, let's see, Ashley muttered, her tone suggesting she'd already decided the outcome. Maya stood there, watching the reflection of the chandelier lights dance across the counter, her mind racing with memories of why she'd built this empire in the first place, to create spaces where people like her, Black women with big dreams, could walk in and feel seen, feel valued, feel home. But as Ashley's smirk deepened and her fingers slowed, Maya felt a sinking realization. This wasn't going to be the warm welcome she'd envisioned. Something was wrong here. Something deeper than a glitch in the system, and she was about to uncover it, whether Ashley liked it or not. The lobby around her buzzed with the quiet hum of luxury guests sipping cocktails at the bar, a bellhop pushing a cart of designer luggage, the soft clink of champagne glasses in the distance. But for Maya, the sound faded into a dull roar, her focus narrowing to the young woman behind the counter, the gatekeeper who held the power to make her feel like she belonged or like she was nothing at all. She thought about her grandmother, a maid who'd cleaned hotel rooms in the Jim Crow South, who told her stories of being invisible, of working in spaces where her humanity was erased. Maya had promised herself she'd build something different, something better, but standing here now, she felt the weight of that history pressing down on her shoulders. She wasn't just a guest in this moment, she was a Black woman in a world that still, sometimes, refused to see her. And as Ashley's dismissive gaze met hers once more, Maya made a silent vow. She'd fight to be seen, not with anger, but with the quiet, unyielding strength that had carried her this far. Little did she know, that fight was about to test her in ways she never could have imagined. The air in the Grand Horizon Hotel's lobby seemed to thicken with every passing second, a silent storm brewing behind the polished mahogany of the front desk. Maya Carter stood there, her deep brown eyes locked on Ashley, the young receptionist whose indifference had already carved a raw wound in Maya's chest. She'd come to Dallas expecting to uncover the cracks in her empire, but nothing could have prepared her for the sting of being dismissed in a space she'd built with her own sweat and dreams. At 45, Maya had faced her share of battles, boardroom skeptics, financial crises, the weight of being a Black woman in an industry that often tried to box her in, but this felt different. This wasn't just a glitch in the system. It was a deliberate slight, a slap in the face of everything she stood for, and the realization hit her like a freight train, leaving her heart pounding with a mix of hurt and fury. Maya took a slow breath, her fingers tightening around the strap of her backpack as she steadied herself. "I have a reservation," she repeated, her voice calm but edged with a quiet strength that had carried her through decades of adversity. She'd spent years perfecting that tone, the kind that commanded respect without raising its pitch, the kind that had turned doubters into believers in boardrooms across the South. But Ashley didn't budge. The young woman's blue eyes flicked up for a fleeting second, her lips curling into a smirk that felt like a dagger to Maya's pride. Sure," Ashley drawled, her tone dripping with a condescension that made Maya's skin prickle. She turned to her computer, her bubblegum pink nails tapping the keyboard with a laziness that screamed she'd already made up her mind. "Name's Maya Carter, right?" "Yeah, nope, don't see it." The words landed like a punch, sharp and sudden, knocking the air out of Maya's lungs for a moment. She blinked, her brow furrowing as she processed the blunt dismissal. "You sure about that?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with a challenge she couldn't quite hide. Ashley didn't even look up this time, her gaze sliding back to her phone, as if Maya's question was nothing more than background noise. "Pretty sure," she said, her tone so casual it bordered on mockery. "Maybe you booked the wrong hotel. Happens all the time." The smirk on her face widened, a silent taunt that said, "You don't belong here, and I'm not about to help you figure it out." Maya's jaw clenched, a hot flush of anger creeping up her neck as she felt the weight of Ashley's judgment settle over her like a suffocating blanket. She'd seen that look before, the one that sized her up in a split second and decided she didn't fit the mold of a Grand Horizon guest. It was the same look she'd gotten years ago when she'd walked into her first bank meeting to pitch her hotel idea, her business plan clutched in trembling hands, only to be told she was too ambitious for someone like her. It was the look her grandmother had described, the one she'd endured as a maid in the Jim Crow South, cleaning rooms for guests who never bothered to learn her name. Maya had promised herself she'd never let that look define her again, but here it was, staring her down in her own hotel, a cruel reminder that some battles never truly ended. Her chest tightened, a mix of hurt and indignation swirling inside her like a storm she couldn't outrun. "I have my confirmation right here," Maya said, pulling out her phone with a deliberate calm that belied the fire raging in her heart. She opened the email, the bright screen displaying her reservation in crisp black and white. Maya Carter, Grand Horizon Hotel, Dallas, Texas, deluxe suite, confirmed. She held the phone up, her gaze steady as she watched Ashley's reaction or lack thereof. The young woman barely glanced at the screen, her eyes flicking over it for less than a second before she shrugged, a gesture so dismissive made Maya's blood boil. "Yeah, well, the system doesn't lie," Ashley said, her voice flat, her attention already drifting back to her phone. "Maybe you made a mistake. It's an easy mix-up." Maya's breath caught in her throat, her fingers trembling slightly as she lowered her phone. A mistake? She'd built this hotel chain from the ground up, her hands in every detail, from the design of the lobby to the training manuals that emphasized hospitality above all else. She didn't make mistakes like this, and Ashley knew that, or at least, she should have cared enough to double-check. But the truth was staring Maya in the face, as clear as the chandelier lights reflecting off the counter. Ashley had taken one look at Hera, black woman in simple clothes, no flashy jewelry or designer handbag, and decided she wasn't worth the effort. The realization cut deeper than Maya wanted to admit, a raw ache that echoed the stories her grandmother had told her, stories of being invisible in spaces where her labor was exploited but her humanity was erased. "Please check again," Maya said, her voice low but firm, a steel thread running through it that she hoped Ashley would hear. She wasn't begging, she was demanding the respect she deserved, the respect every guest deserved in a place she'd built to be a sanctuary. Ashley rolled her eyes, a dramatic sigh escaping her lips as she tapped the keyboard again, her movements exaggerated, as if Maya's request was the biggest inconvenience of her day. "Nope, still nothing," she said, her tone now tinged with a smugness that made Maya's hands clench into fists at her sides. "Sorry," Ashley added, but the word was hollow, a formality devoid of any real apology. She leaned back in her chair, her phone already back in her hand, as if Maya's presence was no longer worth acknowledging. Maya stood there, the hum of the lobby fading into a dull roar in her ears, her mind racing with a mix of emotions she couldn't untangle. There was anger, yes, a burning fire that made her want to call Ashley out right then and there, to demand an explanation for her blatant disregard. But beneath the anger was a deeper hurt, a quiet grief for the dream she'd built. A dream that was supposed to lift people up, not tear them down. She thought about the countless guests who might have stood in this same spot, facing the same dismissal, their voices silenced by the same indifference. And then there was the sharp, undeniable truth that Maya couldn't ignore. This wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate, a choice Ashley had made the moment she'd laid eyes on her. Maya's heart pounded with a resolve she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't just fighting for herself now. She was fighting for every person who'd ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. And as Ashley's smirk lingered in the air like a challenge, Maya knew this was only the beginning of a battle she was ready to win. The tension in the Grand Horizon Hotel's lobby felt like a live wire, crackling with an energy that could ignite at any moment. Maya Carter stood at the front desk, her deep brown eyes boring into Ashley, the receptionist whose smug indifference had already sliced through her like a blade. The sting of being dismissed in her own hotel sanctuary she'd built to honor the dreams of those who'd come before her still burned in Maya's chest, a wound that pulsed with every heartbeat. At 45, Maya had faced countless challenges as a black woman carving her path in a cutthroat industry. But this wasn't just another hurdle. This was personal, a betrayal of the values she'd poured into every brick of this empire. And as Ashley's dismissive smirk lingered in the air, Maya felt a fire ignite within her, a fire that wasn't just anger, but a fierce determination to expose the truth and reclaim the space she'd fought so hard to create. Maya's fingers trembled slightly as she gripped her phone, the screen still glowing with the confirmation email that Ashley had barely glanced at. "Check again," she said, her voice low and steady, but carrying a weight that made the air around them feel heavier. It wasn't a request, it was a demand, one born from years of leadership, from nights spent building this empire from nothing, from the quiet strength her grandmother had passed down through stories of resilience in the face of erasure. Ashley rolled her eyes again, the gesture so exaggerated it felt like a performance, and let out a sigh that echoed through the lobby like a taunt. "I already told you, lady," she said, her tone sharp with irritation. "It's not here. Maybe you should try another hotel." The word lady dripped with condescension, a subtle jab that made Maya's stomach churn with a mix of hurt and fury. She'd heard that tone before, in boardrooms where men twice her age had called her sweetheart while dismissing her ideas, in stores where clerks had followed her as if she couldn't possibly afford to shop there. But hearing it here, in her own hotel, felt like a violation, a crack in the foundation of everything she'd built. For a moment, Maya felt the weight of history pressing down on her, the history of her grandmother, who'd scrubbed floors in hotels like this one, invisible to the guests who never bothered to see her humanity. The history of her own journey, fighting to be seen in an industry that often tried to shrink her. Her chest tightened, a raw ache spreading through her as she thought about the countless others who might have stood in this same spot, their voices silenced by the same indifference. But beneath the hurt, a clarity emerged, sharp and unyielding. This wasn't a mistake, and it wasn't a glitch. Ashley's refusal to help, her casual dismissal, it was deliberate, a choice rooted in the same biases Maya had spent her life dismantling. And in that moment, Maya knew she couldn't let it slide. She wasn't just a guest here, she was the architect of this empire, and she'd be damned if she let someone like Ashley tarnish its legacy. Maya slipped her phone back into her pocket and pulled out a second device, a sleek, unassuming smartphone that held the keys to her empire. As CEO, she had full access to the hotel's internal system, a tool she rarely used in person, but one that had saved her countless times in moments of crisis. Her fingers moved with precision, logging into the system with a password she knew by heart, her pulse quickening as she navigated to the reservations log. There it was, in stark black and white. Maya Carter, Deluxe Suite, confirmed, reservation, manually deleted. And next to the deletion, a name, Ashley, front desk, clerk. Maya's breath caught in her throat, a wave of vindication crashing over her like a tidal wave. She'd known it, felt it in her bones, but seeing the proof on the screen was a different kind of reckoning, a confirmation that this wasn't just negligence, but malice, a deliberate act to erase her presence from this space. She looked up at Ashley, who was still scrolling on her phone, oblivious to the storm she just unleashed. "Tell me something, Ashley," Maya said, her voice low and controlled, but carrying an edge that made the young woman freeze. Ashley's blue eyes flicked up, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face before she masked it with a fake smile. "What?" she snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. Maya turned her phone around, the screen displaying the reservation log in all its damning clarity. "Why did you delete my reservation?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap, its weight pressing down on the lobby with a force that made Ashley's fake smile vanish in an instant. Her face paled, her bubblegum pink nails hovering over her phone as she stammered, "Two didn't... I mean, that's not..." Her words trailed off. Her eyes darting between the screen and Maya's unflinching gaze, panic creeping into her expression for the first time that evening. Maya leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried the weight of her authority. "Don't lie to me," she said, her tone a quiet storm, each word a reminder of the power she held not just as a guest, but as the woman who'd built this empire from the ground up. Ashley's mouth opened and closed, her face a mask of fear and guilt, but no words came out. Maya felt a surge of triumph, a bittersweet victory that tasted more like vindication than joy. She'd uncovered the truth, laid it bare for the world to see, but the ache in her chest didn't fade. She thought about the guests who'd come before her, the ones who didn't have the power to fight back, who'd walked away from this desk feeling small and unseen. That thought fueled her resolve, a fire that burned brighter than her hurt. "Find me a room," Maya said, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. Ashley scrambled to comply, her fingers shaking as she typed, her earlier arrogance replaced by a nervous energy that made Maya's heart ache with a strange mix of pity and resolve. Okay. Two found one," Ashley muttered, her voice barely above a whisper as she slid a key card across the counter. Room 1427. Maya's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion cutting through her triumph. She knew every room in this hotel. She'd designed the floor plan herself, and 1427 was the worst of the lot, a cramped space by the elevators, next to the maintenance closet, with a view of the dumpster out back. It was a final act of pettiness, a last-ditch effort to undermine her, and Maya felt a fresh wave of anger ripple through her. Ashley might have been caught, but she wasn't done playing games. Maya picked up the key card, her gaze never leaving Ashley's face, and made a silent promise to herself. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The lobby of the Grand Horizon Hotel in Dallas felt like a stage set for a reckoning, the chandelier lights casting a golden glow that seemed to flicker with the weight of the moment. Maya Carter stood at the front desk, the key card to room 1427, the worst room in her own hotel, clutched in her hand, its sharp edges digging into her palm like a physical reminder of Ashley's final act of pettiness. The young receptionist's smugness had been replaced by a nervous energy, her pale face and trembling fingers betraying the panic that had set in after Maya uncovered her deliberate deletion of the reservation. At 45, Maya had spent decades building this empire to be a sanctuary, a place where every guest felt seen and valued, but Ashley's actions had turned it into a battleground. Maya was now determined to reclaim. Her heart pounded with a mix of righteous anger and quiet triumph, the fire within her burning brighter than ever as she prepared to deliver the justice Ashley had so carelessly invited. Maya slipped the key card into her pocket, her deep brown eyes locking onto Ashley with an intensity that made the young woman shrink back in her chair. "This isn't over," Maya said, her voice low and steady, carrying the weight of her authority as the CEO of this empire. Ashley's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing her face, but Maya didn't linger to watch her squirm. She turned on her heel, her steps deliberate as she made her way across the lobby to the manager's office, the sound of her heels echoing against the marble floor like a drumbeat of inevitability. The weight of the past hour pressed down on her, the initial dismissal, the deliberate erasure of her reservation, the sting of being handed the worst room as a final insult, but beneath it all, Maya felt a surge of power, a clarity that came from knowing she held the truth in her hands. She wasn't just fighting for herself now. She was fighting for every guest who'd ever been made to feel small in this space, for the legacy of her grandmother, who'd scrubbed floors in hotels like this one, and for the dreams she'd built to honor them both. The door to the manager's office was ajar, and Maya didn't bother knocking. She didn't need to. She pushed it open, her presence filling the small room like a storm rolling in off the Texas plains. Brian, the hotel manager, looked up from his desk, his middle-aged face etched with the kind of nervous energy that came from years of avoiding confrontation. "Miss Carter?" he stammered, his voice tinged with confusion as he adjusted his tie, clearly unaware of the fire he was about to face. "What a surprise. How can I help you?" Maya shut the door behind her, the click of the latch sounding like a gavel in a courtroom. "Sit down, Brian," she said, her tone calm but unyielding, the kind of calm that precedes a storm. Brian hesitated, then sank back into his chair, his hands fidgeting with a pen as Maya leaned against the door, her arms crossed, her gaze piercing. "I just had my reservation deleted by one of your employees," Maya said, her voice steady but laced with a steel that made Brian's face pale. "Ashley, to be exact." She looked me in the eye, decided I didn't belong here, and erased my booking like it was nothing. And then, when I called her out, she gave me the worst room in the hotel room, 1427, by the elevators, next to the dumpster. Does that sound like the world-class service we promise our guests? Brian's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "Tu had no idea," he stammered, his voice weak, his hands trembling. "I mean, I'll look into it, I swear." Maya held up a hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Don't," she said, her voice sharp now, her patience worn thin. "I've already looked into it. I've seen the logs. I've seen the complaints, dozens of them, Brian, all pointing to Ashley. Guests being turned away, ignored, disrespected, and you did nothing." The silence that followed was heavy, the air in the room thick with the weight of Maya's words. Brian's face crumpled, guilt and fear etched into every line as he realized the depth of his failure. Maya felt a pang of disappointment, a quiet ache for the manager she'd trusted to uphold her vision, but it was quickly overshadowed by the fire in her chest, a fire fueled by the memory of every guest who'd been wronged under his watch. "You've let this hotel rot," she said, her voice rising slightly, her composure cracking just enough to reveal the hurt beneath. "You let Ashley turn my dream into a nightmare for people who deserve better, and I'm not going to stand for it." Brian swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "What? What do you want me to do?" Maya straightened, her gaze unyielding. "You're going to walk out there," she said, her tone final, "and you're going to fire Ashley right now, in front of everyone." Brian's jaw dropped, his eyes widening in shock. "Right now?" he echoed, his voice trembling. "But—" Maya didn't let him finish. "Right now, Brian," she said, her voice a command that left no room for it. "She doesn't get to walk away from this. Not after what she's done." Brian hesitated, then nodded, his shoulders slumping as he realized there was no way out. Maya followed him back to the lobby, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and relief as they approached the front desk, where Ashley was still sitting, her phone in hand, oblivious to the storm about to break. The entire lobby seemed to hold its breath as Brian stopped in front of Ashley, his voice shaking but clear. "Ashley, you're terminated, effective immediately," he said, his words echoing through the space like a thunderclap. Ashley's head snapped up, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. "What?" she sputtered, her voice rising in panic. You can't do that. It was a mistake, I swear." But Brian shook his head, his face pale but resolute. "No, Ashley, it wasn't a mistake. You're done." Ashley's eyes darted to Maya, who stood nearby, her expression calm but unyielding, a quiet triumph in her gaze. The young woman's face twisted with anger and humiliation, tears welling in her eyes as she grabbed her bag and stormed toward the exit, her heels clicking furiously against the marble floor. The lobby erupted into whispers, guests and staff alike, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. But Maya felt a weight lift off her shoulders, a sense of justice that washed over her like a cool breeze on a scorching day. She thought about her grandmother, who'd never had the power to demand justice in spaces like this, and about the guests who'd walked away from this desk feeling small and unseen. For them, Maya had fought, and for them, she'd won. But as Ashley's retreating figure disappeared through the glass doors, Maya felt a bittersweet ache in her chest. This was a victory, yes, but it was only the beginning. There was more work to be done, more wrongs to right, and Maya knew she wouldn't rest until her empire was the sanctuary she'd always dreamed it could be. She turned to Brian, her voice steady but firm. "This isn't over," she said, her eyes burning with resolve. "We're just getting started." The glass doors of the Grand Horizon Hotel in Dallas swung shut behind Ashley, her retreating figure a fading echo of the storm that had just swept through the lobby. Maya Carter stood in the center of the polished space, her deep brown eyes scanning the room as the whispers of guests and staff buzzed around her like a swarm of bees. The chandelier lights above cast a warm glow, but to Maya, they felt like a spotlight on a stage she'd never wanted to take, a stage where she just delivered justice, but at a cost that left her heart heavy with both triumph and resolve. At 45, Maya had built this hotel empire to be a beacon of inclusion, a place where every guest felt like royalty, but the events of the day had laid bare a truth she couldn't ignore. Her dream had been tainted by negligence and bias, and it was up to her to rebuild it, brick by brick. As she stood there, the key card to room 1427 still in her pocket, Maya felt a fire in her chest, a fire not just for herself, but for every person who'd ever been wronged in this space, a fire that would fuel the sweeping changes she was about to unleash. Maya turned to Brian, the hotel manager, whose pale face and trembling hands betrayed the weight of his failure. The lobby had fallen into an uneasy hush, the guests at the bar sipping their cocktails with wide-eyed curiosity, the bellhops pretending to adjust their carts while stealing glances at the scene. "You thought firing Ashley would be the end of this?" Maya said, her voice low but laced with a steel that made Brian flinch. "You let this problem fester for months, maybe years under your watch. complaints piling up, guests being disrespected, and you did nothing. Brian opened his mouth to protest, but the words died in his throat as Maya's gaze bore into him, unyielding and fierce. She pulled out her phone, her fingers moving with precision as she accessed the hotel's internal records, her heart sinking as she scrolled through the complaints she'd uncovered earlier. Guest after guest, story after story, families turned away, couples ignored, individuals dismissed with the same callous indifference Ashley had shown her. Each report was a dagger to Maya's heart, a reminder of how far her vision had strayed and a call to action she couldn't ignore. "I trusted you, Brian," Maya said, her voice cracking slightly, the hurt beneath her anger spilling through. "I trusted you to uphold the values I built this place on: hospitality, respect, inclusion, but you let it rot." She thought about her grandmother, who'd worked in hotels like this one, her hands raw from scrubbing floors, her dignity stripped by guests who never saw her as more than a shadow. Maya had vowed to create something different, a place where people like her grandmother, people like her, could walk in and feel seen, feel valued. But under Brian's watch, that dream had crumbled, and the realization brought a lump to her throat, a mix of grief and determination that made her eyes sting with unshed tears. "You're done here," she said, her tone final, her gaze unwavering as Brian's face crumpled in shock. "Pack your things, you're out." Brian staggered back, his hands shaking as he stammered, "Miss Carter, please, I can fix this, I swear." But Maya held up a hand, silencing him. "You had your chance," she said, her voice steady now, her resolve unshakable. "I'll fix this myself." She turned away from him, her focus shifting to the broader task at hand, her mind racing with the steps she needed to take to right the wrongs that had festered under her nose. She pulled out her phone again, dialing a number she knew by heart, her voice sharp and commanding as the line clicked. "This is Maya Carter," she said, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "Shut this hotel down for a full-scale audit, effective immediately. I want every guest compensated, every complaint reviewed, and every employee reevaluated. If they can't meet our standards, they're gone." The staff in the lobby froze, their eyes widening as the weight of Maya's words settled over them like a tidal wave. A young bellhop dropped a luggage tag, the clatter echoing through the silence, while a bartender at the counter fumbled with a glass, his hands trembling. Maya's gaze swept over them, her expression a mix of authority and compassion, a silent promise that she wouldn't let this hoteler legacy fall any further. From her perspective, this wasn't just about fixing a broken system. It was about honoring the people who'd come before her, the ones who'd never had the power to demand better. She thought about her grandmother, whose stories of resilience had shaped her, and about the guests who'd walked away from this desk feeling small and unseen. For them, Maya was fighting. And for them, she'd rebuild this empire into the sanctuary it was always meant to be. But the work didn't stop there. Maya turned to her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she issued a series of directives that would ripple through her entire chain of hotels. Ashley was blacklisted. She'd never work in any of Maya's properties again, her name a warning to others who might think they could get away with such behavior. Every guest who'd filed a complaint at the Grand Horizon would be refunded, comped a future stay, and given VIP status, a gesture Maya hoped would show them that their voices mattered, that their experiences mattered. She felt a swell of pride as she sent the orders, a quiet satisfaction that came from knowing she was taking concrete steps to make things right. But beneath the pride was a lingering ache, a recognition of how much pain had been caused under her watch, and a fierce determination to ensure it never happened again. As the lobby buzzed with the nervous energy of staff scrambling to comply with her orders, Maya took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing for the first time that day. She felt the weight of her grandmother's legacy on her shoulders, a mantle she was proud to carry, and the weight of her own responsibility as a leader, a role she'd never take for granted again. This wasn't just a victory over Ashley or Brianna, it was a victory for every guest who'd ever felt unseen, for every dream she'd fought to make real. And as she stood in the lobby of her hotel, the golden light of the chandeliers reflecting in her eyes, Maya knew this was only the beginning. She'd rebuild this empire, stronger and better, a testament to the resilience of those who'd come before her, and a promise to those who'd come after. No one would ever be invisible here again. The Grand Horizon Hotel in Dallas stood quiet now, its lobby a canvas of golden light and muted whispers as the staff scrambled to enact Maya Carter's sweeping reforms. Maya had retreated to her suit-knot room 1427, but the deluxe suite she'd originally booked her shoulders finally easing as she sank into a plush armchair by the window. The Dallas skyline stretched out before her, a tapestry of twinkling lights against the evening sky, a reminder of the city's ambition and the dreams she'd chased here. At 45, Maya had built an empire that spanned the South, a testament to her resilience as a Black woman in an industry that often tried to dim her light. But tonight, as she sipped a glass of red wine, the events of the day played in her mind like a film reel, each frame heavy with emotion, hurt, anger, triumph, and a quiet hope that bloomed like a flower breaking through concrete. She'd uncovered a rot in her hotel, confronted it head-on, and set in motion changes that would ripple far beyond these walls. But the journey had left her with more than just a victory. It had given her a deeper understanding of the fight she'd been waging her entire life. From her perspective, the day had been a mirror, reflecting not just the failures of her hotel, but the broader struggle of being seen in a world that often looked the other way. When Ashley deleted her reservation, it wasn't just a glitch, it was a reminder of the silent biases Maya had faced since she was a girl, the same biases her grandmother had endured as a maid in the Jim Crow South. Maya's heart ached as she thought of her grandmother's stories, the way she described being invisible, her humanity erased by guests who never bothered to learn her name. But tonight, Maya had fought for her grandmother's legacy, for the guests who'd been wronged, for herself. She'd sawn down Ashley's malice, removed Brian's negligence, and ordered a full-scale audit to ensure no one would ever feel invisible in her hotels again. Each step had been a reclamation, a way to honor the past while building a better future, and as she looked out at the skyline, Maya felt a swell of pride, a quiet satisfaction that came from knowing she'd turned pain into purpose. But the victory wasn't without its scars. Maya's chest tightened as she thought about the guests who'd walked away from the Grand Horizon feeling small, their complaints buried under Brian's inaction. She wished she could have been there for them, wished she'd seen the cracks in her empire sooner. That regret fueled her resolve, a fire that burned brighter than ever as she vowed to be more vigilant, to listen more closely, to ensure her hotels remained the sanctuaries she'd always dreamed they could be. From her corner of the world, Maya had learned a profound lesson. Justice wasn't just about punishing the wrongdoer, it was about rebuilding, about creating systems that uplifted everyone, not just the ones society deemed worthy. It was a lesson her grandmother had taught her through stories of resilience, a lesson Maya had lived through years of fighting to be seen, and a lesson she'd now etched into the foundation of her empire. As she set her glass down, Maya felt a sense of peace settle over her, a calm that came from knowing she'd done right by her values, by her people, by herself. The Grand Horizon would rise again, stronger and better, a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of accountability. She thought about the staff who'd watched her take a stand, the guests who'd be welcomed back with open arms, and the legacy she was building for the next generation, Black women like her, who'd walk into spaces like this and know they belonged. That thought brought a smile to her lips, a quiet hope that warmed her heart. Maya Carter wasn't just a CEO. She was a warrior, a dreamer, a keeper of legacies, and never stopped fighting for what was right. Tonight, Maya Carter reminded us that true power lies not in the empires we build, but in the values we uphold, values of inclusion, respect, and unwavering justice. Her journey is a beacon for us all, a testament to the strength it takes to turn pain into progress, to fight for those who've been unseen, and to create spaces where every voice matters. If Maya's story moved you, if it reminded you of the power of standing up for what's right, then let's keep this conversation going. Like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to fight to be seen? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire, uplift, and challenge us to be better. Because there's so much more to come, stories even more captivating, even more powerful, waiting just for you.